There are some serial killers. What makes them frightening isn't only the number of people they've killed. What's truly frightening is the uncertainty they leave behind. A man turned himself in. He was interrogated, and he began to talk. First he said 18 murders, then 25. Then the number grew even more. This man was either America's most forgotten serial killer, or he was telling one of the darkest lies in history. How many did he kill, and how much of what he said was true? That's exactly the kind of dark trace the Joseph Fischer file carries. His name doesn't appear in official records as often as the most notorious serial killers. But inside this file is a chain of death stretching from one end of America to the other. Half confession, half fog. And maybe the most disturbing part of the file was this. This killer's true victim count would probably never be known. Joe Fischer's childhood wasn't an ordinary story of poverty. There were fights at home, there was violence, there was humiliation. The anger that grew toward his mother turned into an obsession while he was still a child. In his own words, he said he had thought about killing her many times. School life didn't bring order either. He was a rebellious child. He often clashed with the police. He saw reform school at a young age. Then the war came, and for Fischer, everything changed direction here. Fischer entered military life at a young age, but he wasn't a disciplined soldier. He had an alcohol problem, he had control issues, and yet in the war, he found a dark kind of comfort that was his own. He was in combat zones. He grew used to killing. And years later, he would say that even after the war, stopping felt difficult. Allegedly, during the war, he was involved in dark acts not only against enemies, but also involving civilians. Not all official records were clear. The medal stories were also disputed. But one thing was clear. The war didn't extinguish the violence inside him. On the contrary, it fed it. When he returned, he was seen not only as troubled, but as dangerous. After the war, his life didn't get back on track. Arrests followed one after another, then psychiatric hospitals, then violent crimes, and eventually he went to prison. But the truly chilling turning point came right after his release. Just days after regaining his freedom, he killed a 16-year-old. That murder sent him back behind bars for many years. In most files, the story would end here, but Fischer's story didn't. The real darkness began after the second release. He was released again in 1978. This time, there was a woman with him, an older pen pal who would soon become his wife, Claudine Eggers. At first glance, it looked like a strange, late-blooming love story. But in the background, there was something else. Money, aimless wandering, constant movement, and cities that kept changing. This journey quickly turned into less of a road trip and more of a route of death. Arizona, Oklahoma, New Mexico, California, New York. Fischer moved from place to place, leaving behind either bodies or allegations that couldn't be solved. In the end, one of those killed was his wife, Claudine. The woman was found stabbed in the home they lived in together, and Fischer turned himself in. Even up to this point, the file was dark enough. But the truly disturbing part began after he surrendered. Joe Fischer liked to talk. And once he started, he began describing far more than a single murder. First, he said 18 murders. Then he spoke of a number approaching 25. Later, the number grew even more. At one point, dozens of victims, and on the other side, claims exceeding 100. In some states, parts of what he said were being verified. In others, nothing became clear. While some police units took what he said seriously, others thought it was nothing more than pathological boasting. The man had either truly committed countless murders, or he was mixing lies into the truth, burying even the dead in uncertainty. Despite all these confessions, the court process remained far narrower than expected. Joe Fischer was tried mainly for the murder of his wife. But at some point in court, the killer stepped back. He denied it. He tried to save himself, but the jury wasn't convinced. He was found guilty and received a long prison sentence. In other states, there were also suspicions, files, and even some requests for his arrest. But most places didn't pursue a separate trial for him. So there was a strange picture. A man said he had described dozens of murders. The police took some of it seriously, but couldn't verify it. But in the end, only a very small number of cases were officially concluded. What made the Joe Fischer file chilling wasn't only his history of violence. What made this file different is that the truth could never be fully captured. Was he a war hero? Was he a liar? Was he mentally ill? Was he a manipulator boasting of hundreds of murders? Or was he truly a forgotten serial killer who left a bloody trail across American history? Sometimes a killer doesn't only kill people, he kills the truth itself. And what remains is an unsolved shadow,